Connisti, how are ye? My name is Sorcha. I'm here with my brother Aron, and today we are talking about the first in the series of the Book of Invasions, the first person to get to Ireland of all of the people, and the original, the OG, Cesaire.
Yes, indeed, and it's a fun story to tell, I have to say. But we've found that we've pronounced it a few times differently. Sometimes it's Kesser, it's Kesser, it's Kessera, it's something else. I'd say I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of confusion about that though, because we've actually told this story on the podcast before. I think this is one of the first times we're actually doing. Well, we did it with Sive, I suppose. Although we've done it a couple of times. Because this was one of the first stories that was on the podcast, was a different version of this, Cesaire and Finton. And I think we pronounced it two different ways because we'd already recorded the introduction and we were pronouncing it the way that is the wrong way, which is Cesaire, which is the way that I'd first heard it pronounced. But
I
as
mean,
we
right
all
and wrong.
know, this one I'm actually willing to say is right and wrong because there are no soft C's in the Irish language. You never pronounce a C as an S. It's never Celtic, it's always Celtic. And so,
Mm.
and it just like Cesaire had always seemed like such a non-Irish name and such a kind of an
Yeah,
odd one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Well, that's
Cesaire,
kind of the way I thought it was, but yeah, Kesser.
Cesaire is so much more. Cesaire could be from fucking Dune Queen, like, you know what I mean? That's a real Irishy sounding name. um, she makes more sense as an Irish woman when she's called Cesaire, even though obviously, like all of the people in the Book of Invasion series, none of them are actually born in Ireland, which makes it an
Well, that's what I
interesting
was
series.
about to say. So that's why I always kind of accepted the Cesar or the other pronunciation or the whatever pronunciation, because I think like were these stories not here before Ireland even got its name, Ireland got its language, Ireland got its identity. So it's all it's interesting because we're looking at that as the first ever people to come here, but they're not from here. That means they're from abroad, and that's what the whole Book of Invasions does is it just keeps on telling you that there's other people coming to this island at different times, and it's just a place for different people to meet and congregate and battle and fall in love and do all the rest of it. But it's very much one after the other, after the other, after the other, and everybody into until the melting pot happens, and then you've this uh,
Mm-hmm.
option to have a creation story within Irish mythology, and this is the alternative or the kind of the first one.
Yeah, well, I think these are some of these are some of my favorite stories in Irish mythology, and I think they're some of my favorites because they were also some of the hardest for me to get my head around. Because the first time I read any version of the Book of Invasions, it was by an Irish writer called Michael Scott, who does a lot of Irish folk tales and mythology, kind of mostly aimed at children and kind of slightly older children.
Mm.
Um, and they just made no sense because these people arrived and then they all got wiped out. And then these other people arrived and then they all got wiped out. And then these other people arrived and then they all got wiped out. And then these other people arrived and they didn't quite get wiped out, but then they did. And it was just it just seemed like all of these stories went nowhere. And so I couldn't understand when I was reading them as a kid, what was the point of these? Because they don't
There.
what's the point in Cesaire if she gets here and she does this cool stuff and then everybody dies? And I think that it took a long time for me to actually sit with the Book of Invasions and think about the Book of Invasions and kind of unpack the Book of Invasions and reframe it. And I think what I ended up coming to love about it so much is that they don't make sense as stories if the people are the most important thing in the story. But if the land is the most important thing in the story, they do.
Mm.
Because every group, it is recorded how the land responded to them, which is often lakes bursting forth. And it is also recorded what they brought here. And I think that's just a fundamentally different way of looking at these stories.
Mm.
And I think it's a really interesting shift because we often talk about the lack of creation mythology in Irish myth. And it may be that there was one and we've lost it. We don't know what we've lost and what we haven't lost. But I kind of like the idea that we haven't, that
Well, to me,
we
it doesn't
start with
quite
the land.
fit for me because we have these introductions to these characters, and eventually you have a set of characters who stay and then who get ingrained in more, and they crop up in the rest of the mythologies. But and they're the godlike people, they're the Tuatha De Danann, but it doesn't quite fit that if the creation myth, although the Danu, the goddess Danu, as we've talked about, the lost goddess, may have given birth, and the dog is called the father god or the good god, and the mother goddess. Does that mean she literally gave birth to the gods? Seems to me the leap, because if that's the case, then what about these stories that we're telling now that came before them? That's where I'm like, hang on, no, that doesn't quite make sense for me anyway. I think that's the lovely thing. You kind of get a choice with these stories of how to interpret them and
Yes.
take them and make them your own as well. There's a real invitation to kind of make your own mind up with them.
I think so. I think there's a nice openness to them. And I also think there's something nice about, I think, the fluidity of national identity. Like if you take a long enough look at things, very rigid ideas of nation and nationality and like one people in one country, the closer you look at it, the less sense it makes. Not that you have to look at it very closely for it to make no fucking sense at all, because it's not really about making sense, is it? But especially, I was just saying it to you before we came on, that I came across recently a thing that the idea of red hair for Irish people, we kind of consider it a very common thing now, that Irish people are like pale and redheaded, but actually that was a genetic influence from the Vikings. And it was seen as being an outsider thing when it first cropped up in Ireland, because the earliest Irish settlers came from the south. They came from the Iberian Peninsula and from Northern Africa. And that was the kind of main trade route, was along the coast of Ireland, the west coast of Ireland, and down to Spain and down, or to the Iberian Peninsula and down to Africa. And there's some kind of archaeological evidence for that as well, which is really kind of like, that's really interesting as well, that there was a time when the thing that is
Totally.
now considered so quintessentially Irish was considered foreign,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's just the whole kind of amalgamation and adapt thing, and like how cultural identity, is constantly within a melting pot, and you've so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, like where our Irish music comes from, like our trad instruments, the bodhrán. There's you see the Arabic singing styles, the same as the shanos, the melodies, even the percussion, and like they just play the bodhrán differently, but they have one.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. You can see so many little traces of these influences. And it's really, I think it's a really cool thing to just kind of look at a little bit.
Speaking of Arabic states or Arabic areas in the world, today, the Land of Merrow is where Cesaire came from. And so we're just jumping ahead of where people came from, and we're diving straight into, right, there's people. And that's just, no, you don't get anything else. All right, we're starting here. That's it. There was loads of people guys down here. I don't know who they were. But that's all you get. And so the Land of Merrow is, I thought it was in Libya today, but you've looked up and you've actually, not only that, but you found a map that you might talk us through right now and show us if you're watching on YouTube. Uh, like and subscribe to the channel, and you're going to share us a little map to show where I was wrong, basically.
I'm showing you, and if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. We're looking at a picture of some very cool pyramids in a desert, which is apparently this is the kingdom of Kush, and this is the land of Merrow. Merrow is a territory, and it's not a million miles away from Libya. Libya is in northern Africa, and then as you kind of move around, you get Egypt, and then sort of below that today you get Sudan.
Mhm.
And they're sort of, the three of them are along the Nile River, I'm pretty sure. And although I've always thought of Egypt as being synonymous with the Nile, it actually isn't. And so this country of Merrow is where modern Sudan is. It's not exactly the same because they didn't have a sea border and Sudan does. But if you're looking at the YouTube video, you can see this is from the Wikipedia page, by the way. I like
Which,
looking up
yeah,
Wikipedia for stuff.
I love Wikipedia because it's just like, you know what, it's open source information. This is essentially what we do. We're just exchanging our oral stories. Someone told me this, I don't know, cool, part of the story now. You know, it's just, we're making these stories together, believe it or not, like whether you know, you want to admit it or not, I should say. So I'm not always fully sure of the accuracy, but hey, I'm never sure of that anyway.
Exactly. So this was kind of why we decided to look it up. And then as we were looking it up before the chat, we kind of said, oh, sure, Jesus, we'll make this part of the show. Because this is kind of, it's not marked on this map, but this is the sort of territory of the world we're in. Oh, I was wrong. Libya does not have the Nile in it because that's where the Nile Delta is. And that's very definitely Egypt. Geography. So this is a picture of, where the hell is Egypt, the thing? Here we go. This is what I was looking for. This right here is the island of Merrow. Can you see where my mouse is? Can you see where my mouse is, Aron? I can't tell because I'm kind of circling it with my mouse.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
I can. No, I can see it, yeah. But it's amazing. The Saharan pastoral nomads are there, and they're all just basically all of the nomadic area in Africa, but all of the desert, right? Okay, so there's huge. It's just when the Roman Republic had most of Europe, and you see kind of a different Gaelic tribes. I mean, Gaelic, they spelled it.
Gaelic tribes. Well, the Gauls. They were the Gauls, and the Celtic tribes and the Germanic tribes, and the Britons and the Hibernians.
I like how it's Hibernia ? Over Ireland. We didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
No, what the fuck they were doing. Nobody knew what the fuck they were doing. They were running around wild in forests dressed as druids and climbing oak trees and sipping on God knows what. But you can see in this, that's where Merrow is, this kind of little spot on the Nile. So I always think it's really interesting, you know, this is where Cesaire is supposed to have come from. And in some versions of the story, her grandfather is an Egyptian priest. So he would have been from somewhere probably in the Ptolemaic Empire. And in some versions of it, he's Noah. Good old Noah from the Bible. And you're across the way from Arabia, like, and from modern day Arabia, that whole, is it a peninsula? It's so big for a peninsula.
No.
That chunk that has Arabian tribes written on it. What do you refer to that as? The Middle East.
Not a peninsula, Sorcha. That's a huge landmass.
It's huge landmass. Absolutely. But I mean, is Australia an island?
No, continent.
It's not. It's Oceania.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I think. Anyway.
Stop arguing. You're making
Cesaire. So, Cesaire's journey. Do you want to talk about Cesaire's journey for a minute?
Yeah, so I mean, this is the time when the world goes under flood, and there's, you know, according to Stephen Fry, so basically I just take it as gospel. There is evidence that the world was under a huge flood some time ago, a long, long time ago, some say. And, you know, so people must have prepared in some way and must have survived in some areas because the story survived, right? So she comes from and like it's an interesting little loop in from Christianity to include Noah, and you can see it straight away. It's like, warning, this story has been tampered with. Noah is not supposed to be in the story. But like, it's like real subtle there, lads. And yet they set off with 3 times 50 women, and this is the bit that fascinates me. There's a link to the fact that every woman is supposed to be of all the peoples and all the races of the world. So it's kind of like it's the opposite what Noah does, which is hilarious, right? It's an amazing thing that this woman is accredited to doing, gathering all of the females of all over the world, hoarding all of the, like, keep saving the most, like, the race, doing the most intelligent thing, right? I just need 3 lads. Fuck it.
Well, like, I think it's a really interesting question of where your priorities are. Because Noah comes from a kind of a patriarchal culture that says your most important thing is the father and the property. So he gathers all the domesticated animals and he gathers his family. And doesn't that leads to really gross stuff? Because in the Bible, Noah's own daughters seduce him because there are no men to procreate with. They get him drunk and have sex with him so they can have children. Because he didn't think it through. Because he didn't think ahead. Whereas Cesaire did. And as you said, you can absolutely if you're building a colony, you need to bring a lot of women and not a lot of men. And
It's
she
like,
brings, like, she handpicks the women from all over the world. And it's like, what if the whole world is getting wiped out? And also, like, to Kesser, what's important is the people
mm.
and the
and
peoples.
And like I love the idea of the different peoples that she gathers, like represented by the one female from each tribe or from each whatever.
Mhm.
And yeah, but it is the priorities of like it's a human centric decision here, people. We are saving people, not
Yeah.
fucking animals.
And
so
and
it's
saving the cultures as well.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
she's
yeah.
not saying I'm only taking women from my tribe because my tribe is the best tribe. She's saying, okay, all of these tribes in the world have something important. So
Mm,
come on, Bantus and Nok civilization and Saharan pastoral nomads and Garamantians and Ptolemicians. I'm reading off the map here, people.
nice.
Like, and Scythians and Sarmatians, like, come and gather together and come with me, and we will survive, and we'll
Yeah,
build something else.
yeah.
And
It's
then
it's
she goes down the Nile and apparently goes into the Black Sea and sails around the Mediterranean, and it takes her 7 years.
fuck. I
Yeah.
mean, like, yeah, of course it does. And like, she's supposed to have gone along and like seen islands or people's emerge, and she's gone, no, this is not the place for me. And so she gets to kind of northern Spain, and I suppose to be able to see Ireland like, from across that bit of a gap,
And, like,
which
you
is
can see it. I always think it's really interesting to look at maps of the ancient world and try and
mm,
put yourself, like, sometimes when you're looking at old maps as well, you see how distorted, like, the coastlines are, or the shapes of the countries will be really
mm,
distorted, but the coastlines will be really detailed.
mm,
And it's because, like, people didn't have satellites. They didn't have that big view that we have today, where we know what these countries look like, and we know the overall shape of the world
mm,
in a way that our ancestors absolutely didn't. They had a total beetle's eye view of the world, which means you can just see what's in front of you. And so if you're looking, if you're looking at the map of, and like, if you're thinking about how people got to Ireland, for instance, and the fact that all of our most ancient monuments are on the western coast, or almost all of them are like on the
That's where the
west and not on
flew
the
in from.
east.
Mm,
Yeah, because, like, the logical thing, if you're looking at this map, you'd kind of go, okay, well, the quickest way to get to Ireland is from France up through Britain and across from Wales, or down from Scotland. But actually, if you don't know where anything else is, how are you going to do that?
you end up
Whereas,
kind of going that way, hoping for the best and getting blown into Ireland. Like,
or like but you can see it as well, the kind of trade route, like following down from the coast of Ireland. If you go straight down, you don't you're not aiming for the closest landmass because you don't know where it is.
hmm,
So if you go straight south, and probably there's a lot of currents and things that are having an influence here that I don't know about,
yeah,
you're
for
going to
sure.
hit Spain first. And you're going to sail down the coast of Spain because you hug the coastline where you can. And you're going to go right down, northern
Mm,
Africa
maybe I
and
don't think that
back
land
up
bridge
again.
is there anymore. Well, that isn't anymore.
Well,
But yeah,
yeah. Well, you got the Straits of Gibraltar,
yeah,
but you would go, or you got the Straits of Gibraltar today, but you'd go down, you'd keep on going down, and that's the ancient trading route
yeah,
that was actually in force here. That's what was happening. And, like, there was later people came
sure.
from Europe across. Um, but yeah,
Yes.
Hibernia question mark. I'm going to stop sharing now because I think that's the fun
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
of
yeah,
that map is kind of
yeah.
done.
So obviously there's a link with like it's I love the fact that it's just it's so it demands you to inquire about the rest of the kind of community of what it is to be uh you know in this human nature game together and where they all come from. Putting a pin in it is like cool, that might be where that is from, or there's a truth or a little grain of sand or something there.
Mm,
Um, and there's some form of a link of some sort anyway. Now the Bith being Noah's brother is kind of like the obvious link that Noah is related to Kesser. It's the obvious link, and whether she is a leader there or whether she's just goes about gathering it of her own volition. We don't quite know. We don't even know that much about Kessa herself. We just know her through the relationship of the people she gathers, the three men she brings with her, and the prophet
Yeah.
she kind of asks for advice initially. And the prophets basically say, just find the land of destiny, or find your own destiny by finding land. So three men, her father, her brother, and her husband, are they married
hmm
yet? Do
I
we
don't
know?
know. They never actually say when they get married, because in some versions of the story, he's only 15 when they start out, and he's like, Bith is accused of being a thief by Noah, and he's maybe like in the same gang or something, and it's a little sketchy. So I don't know if she married a 15-year-old. Of course, we don't know what age she is when she sets out.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of telling that, the three men that come with her are like, that just kind of points to the centrality of her in the decision, because it's the three men who are her closest male relatives.
My
Yeah.
three come.
I mean, I don't know. There are days when I could see going, you know what? If I'm going to pick only the men that I like. There's not that many. It's a short list. Some of them are really head wrecking, and I don't know them that well.
I'm just glad in this situation that you become the new caster, that I am both, related to you, and you actually like me, so it's great.
Yeah, you're
I
probably
can
safe.
take it. I'm great.
Yeah.
I get in the boat, our dad gets in the boat, and then I guess we let my brother drown. Hey, look, it's fine.
He's fine. He's in a different continent. There's probably not going to be a flood there.
Yeah, exactly. He's fine. Getting him to the boat would be difficult.
What I'm saying,
he'd want
can't
his
save
own.
everybody. Okay, so I'll take you guys and maybe somebody else. I don't know. I'll think about that.
So she sets off with these three guys, and it's all happy days. Now, Kesser, I guess one also thing to mention was the women being representations of the other tribes, and they've some sneaky names within there. So like, you've Gothia, apparently meaning the Goths. You've Alba, obviously meaning Scotland. I have these written down somewhere, and I can't remember where I wrote them down.
You've got a Germania or a Germia for Germany.
That's it.
You've got a bunch of different ones.
Espa for Spain.
España. Yeah,
so
you have
just kind of like subtle little, and they're you should kind of go searching for those names of those women as well. But just sneaky little names to get all the women of. And again, limited view is like supposed to be of all of the women of the world, and a few European kind of.
I mean, yeah, but like, again, your Beatles' eye view, like she's pulling women from Northern Africa and Europe. Really, is her surroundings, and that's where she's kind of bringing them from. And obviously, she's not got the ability to link into more far-flung tribes and peoples. But then the world was smaller. A flood of the Nile was a flood of the whole world at one point, according to the people who lived there, because their world got flooded. I remember this being a wonderful thing in Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, where he's talking about the end of the world and how apocalypses get much, much more infrequent the more cosmopolitan a country becomes. Because like, it used to be that like a heavy rain would be the end of the world, because this is how big your world is. Whereas now it's just a local disaster. And so it's not the end of the world anymore, because there's so much more world.
Right.
And he's got a whole thing about
view. Yeah. Fantastic.
The whole thing about like the four horsemen of the apocalypse being like, ugh, we have nothing to do these days. I cannot remember what book it's in. I just remember, like so many Terry Pratchett things, it's ingrained in my psyche now, and I'm very happy about that.
Yes, there's someone we can just send a blessing to, and
yes.
Oh, like God, I always smile when I think of him. Landing point on the shore of the island they finally get to, the island of destiny, and there's a couple of versions. I always thought it was Kirkigwina, but according to a new source I found, it's Dunmark on Bantry Bay, and it was mainly because I couldn't spell the other one. So I went searching for it, and it's impossible to spell anything. Anyway, fuck's sake, this is how I found it. Like, this is how I found doing the mark. And I just thought I'd give the
It's
alternative one.
impossible to spell anything anyway. I want that on a t-shirt, and I want you to wear it everywhere. Because it is not true that it is impossible to spell anything anyway. But I also know that that is absolutely how you write everything you ever write. Wild guessing. Clickety clackety wild guesses.
Be telepathic and read this email. Yeah, I've gotten better. I think. Anyway, not a bad example right there. But I meant anything in translated from my. I don't know what I meant. They're old Irish words. I'm bad at spelling English, not the Lone Irish.
Percuquina is not an old Irish word. It's a modern Irish word. It also the rules of Irish spelling are way more consistent than the rules of English spelling.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna hang my head in shame. But
hang
anyway,
your head in shame. Anyway, she is in some sources said to have landed in the much easier to spell Bantry Bay, which is why that's this version of the story.
Irish mythology. Yeah, you'll never cease to amuse us or cause us to be amusing.
Yeah.
It's a relationship we have. So they come to Ireland and, well, the island, and I guess it's not really named Ireland yet, but
yeah,
the three lakes spring up. And what's that about? Is it just saying hi, or did it wet itself, or
sometimes when you're very, very excited to see somebody, I'm sorry.
Oh no, we're giddy now. Stop that.
Sorry.
Serious podcaster. People are listening to us after a tough day.
Yeah. No, we
office,
need to be very serious, and I need to not make filthy jokes. So anyway, like I think there's a
doesn't help that I thought there might be a deeper meaning to it. So, like the furrow you would make if you pee. Anyway,
wished.
Okay, so
so the idea, I think, and this is what we were talking about earlier, of like the primacy of the land in this rather than the primacy of the people. Like there's a kind of a suggestion of the island as having a consciousness and having an awareness, and this being a symbolic welcoming, because like what are lakes, for ancient peoples?
What are lakes, Sorcha?
They were shut the fuck up, man. I'm being serious. You be serious. Good God, get a hold of yourself. If you think about if you think about like the Irish as well, like people used to live on lakes in Ireland, the Crannog settlements. They used to build artificial islands because lakes were defensive and they were a water source and they were a food source. And they're also like they're a source of irrigation, they're a source of defense. They're so important to our ancestors as just resources that they can live by and with and live on. And so this idea of lakes springing forth spontaneously as a kind of a welcome, I think I think that's what it's suggestive of, is that Ireland is like, oh good, you're here, have a this is and it also ties into this, or to me it ties in symbolically with this idea of hospitality, because her group splits into three and there are three lakes, and it's very kind of like you're here and be welcome. And what do you do if people come to your house? The first thing you offer them is a drink, be it tea or water or a drink. That's the first thing you offer somebody is something to drink. And so it's something to drink. The land gives her something to drink, and on the scale of an entire country, that's a lake rather than a cup. But it's very kind of let your cup overflow kind of thing. I think it's really cool that way.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And it is that, like, go on, drink away there, lads, drink away. Have as much as you want. Because, I mean, and you've seen those islands, if not in person, then on the old internet. And they are magical. If you ever see a little island in the middle of a lake, and they're just so because you can see like the toughness of having to row in and out of from mainland, but also the security. Like you're not getting off that land, and anyone's going to see you coming from miles away. And yeah, I mean, like you wouldn't want to be there in winter now, But back then, I guess it was fucking. You'd be anywhere in winter. You might as well save in a lake.
Yeah. It was a full-on thing. People used to build their settlements out on lakes and bring their livestock over and draw up the drawbridges.
And so Kesser and her people, they settled, they set up some form of community, and they split into 7 groups. Her father, 3 groups. Her father dies of old age pretty soon, or by snoo, and also her brother dies by snoo, or injury to his leg. So for
plus exhaustion.
Exhaustion. This is a ridiculous twist. This is just like, hang on, you're not saying this, are you? Like, this must have been a modern little twist or a little funny reading between the lines, because monks could have never written this. But essentially, they just imply it, like it's there.
It's very, very strongly implied that they died of too much sex, of having too much sex with too many women, because that was kind of their job. I mean, that was kind of their only job. That's why they were brought, was because we need, all of the women have everything handled in terms of like, knowledge of the world and women of art and skill and all this kind of stuff. They all have their expertise. They all have their abilities. You guys are here for one reason.
You know what gets me? I'm like, did you not get one past the post, lads? Like, come on, like, they say, I joke and say he died with a smile on his face, but come on, there were a few shots at the post at least. Like, Jesus, did anyone survive? Like, did any offspring happen?
This is a really interesting thing to me about Cesaire, because Cesaire arrives in Ireland and Ireland is empty, and Cesaire's people are said to completely die out, except for the surviving shape-shifting Finton MacBocra. And the next time people come to Ireland, there are shape-shifting people who live in the north who are there and have to be challenged. So I think that it is, I highly suspect this narrative that they all died out. I think her people are so symbolically linked to the Fomorians that it makes perfect sense to me that that's her legacy. That Cesaire's people become the Fomorians and the Fuiwera. Because if you think of like Finton's whole thing is the ability to shapeshift. And she spends so long at sea and is so connected to the sea and to water and these lakes springing forth. And like just that fact of Ireland is empty when they arrive, they are said to die out. And when the next people get there, Ireland is not empty. That seems to me to, because there's no story of the Fomorians coming to Ireland. Yeah. They're just there. Yeah. The next time, like when Partholon shows up, they're just there. And they're not explained. And so it seems that has always been my little fill in there, is that the Cesaire's descendants become the Fuiwera.
Interesting. I never really thought of it like that, because again, I always saw it as like the invasions, they come, they die, or they come, they die, they come, they die, until and like I like the idea, and I like the idea of the seafaring folk coming from Cesaire and staying and remaining, because I think it's something I will be talking about more in this series will be the portrayal and image of the Fomorians and the Fuimura, the people from under the sea. I'm fascinated with them. I love the idea behind them, because there's again so little and so kind of diverse descriptions of them being the beautiful folk or deformed and mutilated and disgusting and hideous, and being below the sea and above it, and having 7 kingdoms, and they're only from one island. I mean, like, so where are the kingdoms? It's this below the sea mystery thing, and I guess we'll be shining both light and dark upon the Fuimura throughout the rest of the series. So put a pin in that, I guess, because we'll be coming
Yeah,
back to that.
we'll be coming back to that. We'll be coming back to that. And I think it's always, this is something that a Donegal friend of mine always points out, which is that the Fomorians are not bad guys in Donegal, because Tory Island is in Donegal, and the National Theatre in Donegal is the Ballor Theatre. He's not a bad guy. He's not a villain if he's yours. And I think that's a really interesting thing about Irish mythology in general. And as you said, we will come back to it, and we will talk more about it, because we will be talking about Balor himself.
Indeed, we will. And it's interesting as well, because it's something that we've talked about on the storytelling course, of like, we're always looking for a bad guy in a story. And so it's sometimes just easier to tell a black and white story, because you go starting with good and ending with bad, and having a resolution between the two. And it's often easier to even listen to a story and pick a side, and have your protagonist be the hero. So it muddies the water when we don't know who to shout for. And it kind of makes, when you have that protagonist being who committed the awful crime that you were trying to solve, who did it? And you're like, oh no, it was her all along, or whatever. It makes you not okay. It makes you go, oh, that's possible in me too. What? Oh no. And it makes it more human in a way.
Yeah.
So
it gets us out of, and I know we were talking about this before, but it gets us out of that, like, there are good people and there are bad people notion of dividing people into wholly good and wholly evil, which I think is something we do a lot. And I think it's a lot to do with the mythology that we grew up with, which is primarily Abrahamic. In this country, it's primarily Christian, and it's very black and white. You're good or you're bad. You're right or you're wrong. You're one of the saints or you're one of the sinners, and there's no gray.
And you do need that as kids. You do need a kind of a certain right and wrong and rules, and kind of like to figure out your surrounding. You kind of do need a bit of a parameter. And I think that just becomes overburdened in a cultural context. I think kids do need a kind of they do it naturally anyway. They look for the light and the dark and the good and the bad and the on and off and the tell me yes, tell me no type thing. It helps a certain level of development. But once you get out of that, you need to understand the more complexities of the things.
Yeah, like a lot of kind of moral or ethical things, it's helpful until it becomes limiting. And after that point, it's then limiting. And so after that point, we have to kind of move beyond it. And I also think it's it's always for me one of the most rich and interesting things about Irish mythology is just this whole thing. And it's not just Irish mythology. You look at Norse mythology, you look at Greek mythology. These are very black and white. These are, very morally grey characters. Some of them are absolutely fucking assholes, and they're the king of the gods.
Yeah.
Not naming any names. Zeus, rapist.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Never.
I was trying to find a good segue, but now you've giving me nothing. But I want to talk about Finton with Okra. I was like, speaking of change. No, not that. Speaking of a man. So Finton Okra is one of these characters that we'll probably see again. He basically does what any sane man would do in his position, told to repopulate the land with all these women, and he hilariously legs it, which I kind of love. I guess that can't not just be played, well, I guess by me anyway, for a laugh, because it's just ridiculous. And it's one of those, like, how could he run away from the destiny and the people and the choice and the thing he had to do? Like, seeing 50 women, was he, I don't know, maybe he just really didn't want to sleep with any of them.
I mean, maybe he loved his wife. Maybe that was going to be really fucking awkward. Maybe she was not actually as okay with that as she thought she was going to be. Maybe he was not into women. Yeah. Maybe he was asexual. Maybe he preferred to not have sex. There's all kinds of possible explanations you could read into Finton. Running away from 50 women who want to sleep with you is probably indicative of something not quite straight. But
fuck this, I gotta run away. That's what I think it is. You make up your own mind.
Or he's been in Ireland how long at this point, and he's been sleeping with how many women already? Maybe you get bored. I don't know.
Not one past the post though, really, Finton. Maybe they're Fomorians.
Fomorian.
There you go. That makes sense. It does.
Doesn't make sense. Makes sense, man.
It sets up quite an interesting kind of kind of balance between the first battle of Moitura, then if Finton, because he takes the side of the Firbolg and he tries to help them defeat the Fomorians. Ooh. So we'll be getting to that story along with others, because the eternal shape-shifting observer of Finton MacBoker will kind of stay in the background every now and again, cropping in and out, as he sometimes is weaves within these stories as one observer and one kind of figure you can view the rest of the stories through. Similar to, I think he represents Ireland then as a personification, in a way. He becomes the All Father in a way. He's just there.
Well, he's as someone who shapeshifts and kind of knows Ireland from every perspective. I think he's an interesting kind of shamanic character. Like this whole idea of him moving between worlds, and like he's not the last of these kind of like liminal shape-shifting characters that you'll see. And like,
But
the
he
Tuatha
is,
Danann seem to be very intuitively magical as well, in terms of their ability to just shape shift or change each other's shapes, and it comes up a lot. But Finton, it almost feels more kind of instinctive with him. He's
he
dreams.
did it by accident.
Yeah, he almost does it by accident, and he kind of doesn't. In the story of the Hawk of Achill as well, there's that part in the colloquy where he's like, I don't know how it happened, but one day I was the salmon.
Yeah, that's a beautiful conversation, and it's one we did last year that we meant
Yes.
to record for podcast, and then we just did it for a live show, and then I was my bad, I didn't. But we'll be getting to that eventually, and I guess we'll be getting on to Parathlon next week. We will have released, by the time this comes out, the dates for our new storytelling course, the Arc of Storytelling. We've been very excited about kind of tinkering and tightening a few little nuts and bolts, reshaping with the feedback, the great positive feedback we got from people in the first and second course. And we're excited to be expanding it a little bit and starting on the 27th of April. So if you want to find out more about that, get in touch. And if you're a liker of the show, thank you very much for listening. If you're a new person, there's loads of episodes. You can go back and have a listen. You can like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on social medias. And that's about it. And Patreon. Thank you. You can go to patreon.com/candlelittales if you want to contribute. Is that everything, Sorcha?
I think that's everything. Thank you very much for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.
You.